So welcome everybody to ADHD support group meeting for October, the year of the good Lord 2022. And it's really good to be here. It's good to see you all. And we're going to learn something tonight from Tash. So Tash will be presenting tonight. She is in her practical stages of her coaching training. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Tash, and let's go from there. Enjoy the evening, ask lots of questions, and thanks for joining us.
Cool. Good evening, everybody. So I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for Tracy for giving me the opportunity. So as Tracy said, my name is Tash, and I am mom to an ADHD daughter. So my life is an adventure and a roller coaster, and I'm busy doing my ADHD course, as Tracy said. So I'm just going to share the presentation. So if you just give me a moment while I bring it up, so that everybody can see where we are. Cool. Yeah, so tonight we're going to be, can everybody see the presentation? Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, I'm seeing nods, so that's good.
The wrong thumbs up.
So perfect. Tonight we're going to be talking about gaslighting and ADHD. Okay, so what the coaches at the School of Life have been seeing in their clients with ADHD is that there's an increased reporting in gaslighting in relationships and in their jobs. And so we thought that we'd set up a session tonight to talk about gaslighting. And what is gaslighting? What does it mean? I have to be honest, it's a term that I wasn't very familiar with. So looking into this has been a nice journey of discovery for me. And then once you uncover it and understand it for what it is, and then understand what the impact it is that it has on your own life and relationships that you have where this kind of thing occurs. So gaslighting is a form of psychological or emotional abuse. It's a series of manipulative techniques which are designed to gain control of another person. Okay, this could be seen by blatantly and repeatedly lying or challenging reality. And the gaslighters keep their victims off kilter and make them question themselves. So sometimes even a person's diagnosis of ADHD could be used against them or her by the gaslighter. And adults with ADHD are more vulnerable to gaslighting due to issues that they may have with self-esteem, difficulty with past relationships, and feelings of guilt and shame that can often be associated with ADHD, just from their upbringing, experiences in school, and experiences in the workplace. And one of the best defenses against gaslighting is to educate yourself about this kind of emotional abuse and to know that there's hope and that you can rebuild your life after living with gaslighting for months or even years. And that's what this session is about. It's about explaining what gaslighting is and then also to give you some coping strategies or suggestions of how you could deal with it if it's something that you're experiencing in your life. Okay, so there's different forms of gaslighting, and the National Domestic Violence Hotline has given a list of examples of different forms of gaslighting that you might encounter in your relationships, whether they're personal or work. And we'll go through the different environments that it can occur in a little bit later. But if we look at the different forms of gaslighting, there's something that's called countering. And this is where someone questions a person's memory. But they're thinking things like, are you sure about that? Or oh, you have such a bad memory. And I think that you're really forgetting what really happened. And that can cause a lot of insecurity and uncomfortableness. Because now all of a sudden you're not sure, is it my memory? Did it happen like that? Another form of gaslighting is withholding. And this is when somebody pretends they do not understand a conversation or they just refuse to listen. And this makes the person doubt themselves. For example, someone might say to you, I don't even know what you're talking about, or you're just so confusing. And then there's trivializing, okay? And this occurs when a person belittles or disregards how someone else feels, okay? And they may accuse them of being too sensitive or overreacting in response to valid and reasonable concerns. You know, oh, I was just joking. You're not really that stupid. You know, and I think that there's things that we've all heard in our lives, you know, that when we hear it, it throws us off kilter, because are we trivializing? Like, is it really, are we making a big deal out of nothing? You know, and I think it's really important for us to understand these forms of gaslighting so that we can identify them. Additional forms of gaslighting might be denial, which involves a person refusing to take responsibility for their actions. They can do this by pretending to forget what happened, saying they did not do it, or blaming someone else for that behavior. Okay. And this doesn't count if it's like your 4-year-old. Okay. 4-year-olds are allowed to do that. Okay. Because it's part of growing up and learning to be themselves. But this is not okay if this happens in your adult relationships. Okay. There's diverting, where the technique is for the person to change the focus of a discussion by questioning the other person's credibility. They might say things like, oh, that's just nonsense that you read on the internet. It's not real. And then there's also stereotyping. And so there was an article in the American Sociological Review that said a person may intentionally use negative stereotypes about someone's race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, nationality, or age to gaslight them. For example, they may say, no one would believe a woman if she reports abuse. Or you're not old enough to know what you're talking about. Okay. So those are the different forms of gaslighting, okay? And we also see it when the kinds of the behavior. Gaslighters sometimes hide their partner's belongings and blame their partners for being irresponsible, lazy, so ADHD when they can't find their items, okay? A gaslighter might also tell their partner that they don't need to take medication for ADHD because I know what you need better than some doctor does, because I know you. Okay, so, and gaslighting behaviors can also include things like telling you that you didn't see or hear something, that you're imagining it, cheating often, and then obsessively accusing you of cheating. Okay, so that projecting, saying that other people think you're crazy, and pitting you against somebody else. This is known as triangulating. Okay, and then idolizing you 1 minute and then devaluing the next, and finally discarding the relationship. So these are the kinds of behaviors that might be resonating with you. And you might be listening to this and starting to look at some of your relationships and think, well, actually, I can identify with some of the things that are being. And so the question is why and how do gaslighters target people with ADHD? And, you know, gaslighters can sense vulnerability in a person, and they specifically target people who are grieving a loss or who feel inadequate or who feel isolated. So people who are maybe a bit more emotionally raw. And if you had ADHD, you probably grew up with feelings that you were less than. And you may have had difficulty maintaining friendships and relationships. And you may have been dismissed by others who said you were difficult. And when you meet a gaslighter for the first time, he or she will do something that's called love bombing. Okay. They will tell you everything you wanted to hear. Especially after a lifetime of rejection. And the purpose of this behavior is to hook you. So once you are committed to the relationship, the gaslighter begins their abusive behavior. And early on in your relationship, they might ask you about what are your fears, what are your inadequacies. And it feels good. It feels really good to have somebody listen to you and someone care about you and someone who's in your corner and someone who you trust and who you believe will always be there for you. But in reality, the gaslighter is just gathering data that they can use as ammunition against you at a later stage. And eventually you will hear things like, well, no wonder your sister doesn't talk to you anymore. She knows you're crazy too. And that is really hurtful. And because this person, you know, apparently loves you and knows you so well, you know, you'll start to question your understanding of reality versus what they're telling you is reality. And if you leave the relationship, the gaslighter will, it says hoover, but they will hover drawing you back. So they might hoover. If they could hoover your house, that would be really nice. But I think they might just hover. I mean, hover, and trying to win you back and trying to draw you back, because it's a question of control and it's a question of power for them. So they will send messages through friends and family that they miss you, that they promise you the world, but they won't apologize. And they don't think that they did anything wrong. Okay, they will blame you for your understanding and, what we learned about earlier about the trivializing, that you misinterpreted it, it doesn't mean anything. And the threat of losing their ability to manipulate you motivates a gaslighter to get you back in their clutches. And once you return to all those promises that were made to you, all those promises disappear. And the relationship turns to even more be abusive than beforehand. And, it might sound easy to hear about this now, but the thing about abuse is that it starts off slowly, and it starts off subtly, until it grows to a situation of where it is abuse and it is unmanageable. Okay. So what are the causes of gaslighting? Why do people gaslight? Okay. So gaslighting is a behavior that people learn by watching others. And they see it as an effective way of getting what they want or controlling other people. They may feel entitled to have things their way. And the wants and needs of others don't matter. Okay, so it's not a case of I'm okay, you're okay. It's a case of I'm okay and I don't really care where you are. Okay. So sometimes these people could have personality disorders. They may be narcissistic. And, narcissistic people have been documented as having a constant need for admiration and attention, a belief that they are better than anyone else or special in some way, and a lack of empathy. Okay. And this combination of symptoms can lead to unhealthy relationships. Okay. And gaslighting is not always due to a mental health condition. Anyone can engage in this behavior. It also operates on a broader scale, and it can be systemic oppression, okay, where people in power sometimes use it to damage the credibility of a person or group that disempowers them. Okay, so it could happen in your personal relationship, but it can also happen in our society and in our groups where we are members of groups for certain reasons. Okay, so these are the different situations where gaslighting could occur, okay, and that they're quite common in intimate relationships, okay, and this is where, as we spoke about earlier, that the ADHD person could be quite susceptible, because here is a person that, initially they thought understands them and wants to support them and loves them, but the abusive person is using gaslighting to isolate the partner, to undermine their confidence, to make them easier to control. They might tell someone that they're irrational until the person even starts to think, well, that's true. It can occur in child and parent relationships where abusive parents or caregivers may gaslight children to undermine them. For example, when a child cries, they may be told that they're too sensitive, to shame them and make them stop. We also sometimes find medical gaslighting, okay, where a medical professional might dismiss, your health concerns, saying that it's all in your head or you're a hypochondriac. And because of often there's, quite a lot of esteem that is given to the medical profession and their expertise, that can be particularly disconcerting, because the symptoms that you're experiencing are quite real, but you're being told that they don't exist and that you're making them up. There's racial gaslighting, okay, and according to an article in Politics Group and Identities, racial gaslighting is when people apply gaslighting techniques to an entire racial or ethnic group in order to discredit them. For example, a person or institution may say that an activist campaigning for change is irrational or crazy, and they might minimize the cause before, that they're trying to stand up for. Okay. And then there's political gaslighting. And I think we all see a lot of this in the media, where political parties will control the information and control people. Okay, so a person in a political party might downplay the things that their own administration has done wrong, or really discredit their opponents by over exaggerating flaws or mistakes that have been made by other parties, to deflect away from their own mistakes. And there's institutional gaslighting. So when a company, an organization, or an institution, they might portray whistleblowers who are as irrational or incompetent, or deceive employees about their own rights. So it's not just in our own personal relationships. It could take form in any part of our lives, and it's very important to be aware of it so that we can be objective when we experience it and try to understand what is real and what is not. Okay. So there's definite signs of gaslighting. And if you are experiencing gaslighting, it can be quite difficult to recognize the signs because you trust the abusive person or the political party or the work environment or the medical profession. And, maybe then you do start to believe that you really do have a poor memory or that you are oversensitive. But if a person often feels unsure, second guesses themselves, or relies on someone else to confirm their memories to help them make some simple decisions, this may be due to gaslighting. Okay. And it's signs such as feeling uncertain about your perceptions, frequently questioning if you remember things correctly, believing that you're irrational or crazy, feeling incompetent, unconfident, worthless, constantly apologizing to the abusive person or defending the abusive person's behavior to others, and becoming withdrawn and isolated from others. And those are all the signs of abuse, okay? It also contributes to your anxiety or depression and results in psychological trauma, okay? Especially if it's part of a wider pattern of abuse. Okay, it doesn't necessarily appear in isolation. So how do you respond to gaslighting? Like, what is it that you do? Okay, so the one thing you could do is you could keep a secret diary. Okay, and in that diary, you record the incidences. So a date, a time, details of what happened soon after you experience it. And that means that you can refer to it later. So when someone says, oh, you're remembering that incorrectly, you can go back and you can look at your records and you can just know for yourself, well, actually, no, I'm not remembering that incorrectly. That is exactly what happened. And you could talk to somebody who's trustworthy. Don't become isolated from your friends and your family and the people that are important to you, and confide in a friend or a family member, or maybe a counselor that can help you gain some perspective on the situation. Because these people are probably also often witnesses to the events. You can take photos because these are often fact check for your memories. And you can also keep voice memos. So if you have a device, like on a lot of our phones, we have voice recording options. And that's quite a quick way for you to describe what happened in your own words so that you can go back and you check it. Okay. But if you are in an abusive relationship, then if you are doing the above things just to try and make sure that you understand what is real and what is not, then you need to make sure that you keep them private. Okay, especially if you share a home or a workplace with the perpetrator. Okay, so you can regularly erase your search history. And you can also use, rather than Google, which brings up your last searches, if you forget to erase it, you can use things like DuckDuckGo, which doesn't keep a record of it. You can store evidence in a hidden or locked away place, and you can keep your devices locked away. You could buy a second phone or a cheap voice recorder, or you can send copies of the records to a trusted friend, and this allows a person to delete their own copies. So those are some various things that you could do if you experience that you are being gaslighted. because this will allow you to check the information, and especially if you confide in somebody else, the two of you will be able to look at the situation objectively to see, is this a gaslighting situation or not? And if you realize that you're in a gaslighting situation in a relationship, how do you leave? How do you escape this relationship? Okay. So for most people, leaving a gaslighting relationship means no contact at all. You need to block that person from your phone. You need to block their emails, and you need to tell friends and family that you will not listen to any messages sent through them. Okay. You need to build a wall around you with regards to that person. Okay. It's also a really good idea to meet with a licensed healthcare mental health professional or with your ADHD coach, and just talk about what has been going on and maybe come up with a plan of how do you deal with this going forward. Because having ADHD makes you also vulnerable to anxiety and mood disorders. Okay, so it's very important that you look at your mental health and you get some support in order to assist you to deal with the situation. Okay. And that could be setting up a follow through on your ADHD treatment plan to, and also to make sure that you reestablish the healthy, positive connections to the people in your healthy people in your life. You know, the people that you value, the people that you trust, and the people that are there to support you. Because when we have positive relationships, we build each other up rather than breaking each other down. Okay. If you have a child with a gaslighter, then you would need to meet with an attorney so that you can establish a detailed parenting plan. Because, you know, it'll be very difficult for children growing up in that kind of an abusive environment. Okay. And if things are serious, you can always make sure that you have a safety plan. And this might include having a list of places to go, escape routes that a person can flee, emergency contact details, ideas for self-care to help you cope, the relationship, home or situationship, because I knew her through work, so her partner didn't know anything about me, and she had a bag that was constantly packed for her and her young children in the back of her car, so that if anything did happen, she knew that she could phone me at any time and she could come over and she would be able to be here without him ever finding where she was, because there was no connection between us as far as he was aware. So, you know, it's really important if you find yourself in a situation of abuse or being gaslighted, that you look into it, understand, you know, take the recordings, write down your memories and look at it and understand if what you're consistently being told is true or not. You know, bring in a trusted person so that they can help you and support you. Work with your ADHD coach so that they can also support you on an action plan on how to move forward. And help you with your anxiety or depression with regards to that. And then if needs be, make sure that you have a safety plan in place. So that brings us to the end of the talk about gaslighting. So we're going to open it up to questions now. So don't know that if I can see hands or anybody. So I think if anybody has any questions or any experiences that they want to share, because I think often the way that we can learn to understand a situation in the best way possible is by hearing other people's shared experiences, you know, because that often resonates with us, you know, rather than just the words that we hear from a theoretical point of view.
Tash, just to add a bit on everything, you went quite well, like so efficiently, so deep into the whole unhealthy and toxic behavior stuff. But I just want to add a couple of things to your presentation. One is the hoovering. It is actually hoovering. It comes from the word vacuuming. It's actually when the an unhealthy partner or a toxic partner tries to suck you back into the relationship. And the way they do that is they play on your insecurities. So sometimes if it's in a relationship, they actually would flaunt a new partner next to you or someone to make you jealous. They can plead on your empathetic side. So they'll give you a sad story about something, victimizing themselves because they know your insecurities. So it is actually hoovering. You weren't wrong about that. It's actually to suck a person back into an unhealthy relationship. That's number one. Number two, you brought on a few traits that are usually considered narcissistic traits. So it doesn't mean that your partner or your boss or whoever it is that you're dealing with is a narcissist, but there's a lot of people that have narcissistic traits. And one of the other solutions is, first, I'll answer the one question that you have. A lot of people ask the question, how do I know I'm being gaslit? And how do I know I'm in a toxic relationship? Right? We get these questions all the time. If in fact you need to go to the lengths of having to keep video evidence and messages and have an accountability partner, that is inclination number one, that you're definitely in an unhealthy relationship. So when you couple that with ADHD, you got to be very, very careful that you don't go down a rabbit hole of making that now your life progress. It can be a tool up until a certain point to help you, make sense of the situation, but to be very careful that we don't go down a rabbit hole and adopt these methods as a part of something to remain in the relationship. That's number one. Number two, there's a method that they call gray rock method. So it's a bit of a controversial method, only because some people feel that it's undermining the type of abuse that they're in. But what a gray rock method is actually, I think it's more helpful in corporate environments, in work environments, rather than in abusive relationships. But what that means is basically becoming a gray rock and not giving into the drama. So what you'd basically do at work is not get involved in any hot topics with the toxic person. So you'll skate around those topics and not get into it with them. And that would help you not get sucked into the drama. Because remember, these toxic people are looking for fuel supplies. And the fuel supply is that they get from people with ADHD and highly empathetic people in order to fill whatever thing that they're trying to fill. So that's a gray rock method that might be helpful, especially in work environments. I just want to add that to your presentation.
Oh, no, thank you so much. No, so I definitely learned something new, guys. Hoovering. And
Yes.
also the gray rock method. That's brilliant. Thank you. Cool.
Thanks.
Does anybody else have any experiences that they want to share or any questions?
So I think it is something, as in a lot of the time when you are passive as a person and your boundaries are porous, it's very easy to get sucked into this and start believing your self-esteem is low. You believe that you're the one who's doing wrong. You need to be better. You need to do better because you're so easily manipulated and you're so soft. You're like a putty. But eventually you get to a point where no, there's something wrong here. This can't be right. And I think that's one of the most effective things is to keep a log of what has been said to you. Okay, because then you can actually go back and reflect and say, but is this really true? Is this really me? Especially when I've been through it, my first marriage, and I thought I was the one. I was a problem. Okay, and I was too proud. I was always known as a strong one to go talk to anybody. I can't go talk to my mom about it or anything else like that. So nobody knew I was in this terrible marriage for 13 years. And I never said anything because I thought I was the loopy one. And then one day you think, no, you start dying. Eventually, slowly but surely, you start dying. And then, yeah, that's it. We all have that bottom line. And one day is one day, and one day is enough. And it's finished, it's over, it's done. But if I'd started questioning and writing things down and looking at it, maybe it wouldn't have ended up the way it did. So I've got to own my part in that too. But I didn't know that this is what I should do. So you don't know what you don't know. Okay, you just go into things and you do the best that you can. But these are the skills and tools that you can use. So if you're not sure, write it down, keep on looking at it, and then maybe ask somebody, do you think I can be like this, or am I like that? And then question yourself, so you can just sort of get to some level of sanity where your feelings aren't your facts. And by just knowing that your feelings aren't your facts, it actually just puts you back into a position to do something. Instead of just keeping quiet. So you keep quiet to keep the peace. But the pieces actually become the pieces. Yeah, the piece becomes pieces. And then it's broken. It's too late.
You know, Tracy, Tash emphasized some very important points in terms of connection and having a trusted person that you can go to. Like, that's one of the biggest things. A lot of us in the community, we're always asking, you know, but what can I do? You know, it's an internal problem, or it's someone's marriage, or it's someone's whatever. It's just to be that listening ear and that voice of reason, because a lot of people in these situations don't have the clarity and don't have that voice of reason. And that's why having that evidence is so important, because you need to see it in your face. And on top of that, you need someone trustworthy that's not going to go around and, you know, blast your story everywhere, but just be there to listen and help you digest and make sense of everything when you're in that position where you can't see clarity for yourself. So support and connection is very important.
Absolutely, I agree
That
with you.
objective viewpoint.
Yeah.
But it's important you can find somebody you can trust and open up to without judgment.
I think if you're worried about the judgment and you don't have someone that you can open up to and trust, you know, I mean, I think that that's where, you know, your ADHD coach, or, you know, a counselor or something like that, or even somebody maybe at your church or at your religious institution, you know, can provide that objectivity for you. Because sometimes I think, you know, being in a situation like that can adversely impact your personal relationships. Or you maybe are worried about, you know, the story getting around or what people might say, you know, so there's also that option of an independent or a more independent person that could be there to be able to support you.
And I think it's harder with a person with ADHD because of our RSD. And so extremely sensitive. So any type of strange look or wrong body language or gesture just makes us want to shut down, because they're not going to believe me, or they're going to judge me, or because of the hypersensitivity. So it makes it so much worse for us to open up.
No, for sure.
You know, gaslighting on social media, the very simple definition of it is, you know, questioning your sanity and questioning, like basically make you feel like something happened, but it didn't actually happen, questioning the situation. But it's very important also, especially when you recognize the severity of how far the abuse can go, it's to know that whoever is gaslighting you, it's a very calculated and manipulative and planned out intention that they have, and that is to dismantle you. There's no other intention behind someone who's gaslighting you except to dismantle, you know, the very core of who you are. So it's also to understand that it's not as simple as how the social media platforms put it out there. It can be a very severe thing.
So for me, the greatest thing was, I think everybody's like me. So you keep on thinking everybody's like me. So why would they do that? You can't imagine that everybody's different. It's an automatic thing. I think all of us think everybody's like me. So why would they do that? That's unkind. That's horrible. That's abusive. Why would they do that? So I think that's what you've got to sort of then eventually get to a place, and that takes years, because you keep on thinking people are like you, and they're not. And then to make that realization just changes your whole reality, because now everything's different. How are you going to trust? How are you going to move forward? How are you going to have connections? So it shifts a lot inside you.
That speaks to your heart, Tracy, because you have a good heart. That's why you need someone like me, good cop, bad cop, that's constantly telling you how people are evil. So we can just balance each other.
Yeah.
But Samaya, I like your Greystone type of concept, because
Yeah.
I think not only is it in like a corporate environment, whatever, I think even if you're around in a social environment, for instance, and you feel that there's someone that is like just, like you say, you know, just very toxic, and you actually don't want to start a situation because you know where it's going. You can already like see
Mm.
where they put, you know, the conversation is going to end up. Is just actually that as well. Just try to
Yeah.
just take yourself out of it. Talk about something that's so impersonal and just something that's so like everyday, that you don't get drawn into something that's going to cause you to become emotional, or to become, you know, to get this feeling of just like feeling completely and totally like overpowered or whatever. So I
And
think that
drained.
type of situation does work. You've just got to know yourself beforehand that this is what you're going to do, because you can anticipate that something like that is going to happen. And then just try to have that like complete and total impersonal, the discussion just goes away from anything that you know that's going to affect you in your own way and touch on any sensitive points.
Mm. You know, Shireen, where Grey Rock method actually helps a lot is in strong cultural backgrounds, where we constantly in a lot of family situations where, you know, like people come and be like, oh, but I can't get rid of my auntie or my uncle or my mother, father, whoever it is, right? It's you can't remove people out of situations, and neither can you remove yourself. And
Yeah.
again, I'm not talking about abuse. I'm talking about unhealthy, toxic situations that you can work around. Abuse for me is a definite no. You need to remove yourself. But when it comes to these unhealthy, toxic situations, it's to know, like you said, not get sucked into the drama. And I think another skill that comes handy here is reflective listening. So reflective listening is whatever they're throwing at you, all you got to do is, oh, okay, it seems like you're very stressed out, you know, basically reflect whatever it is, but not giving your opinion and not getting sucked into the conversation of that.
True. And I think, you know, in most instances, you have a sense of where that person is going, and you know the type of person they are. So you almost like preempt it, and you already plan to say that this is how it, as you say, you sometimes can't avoid it. But when you are there, you try to manage it so that it doesn't actually put you down or make you feel like less of a person, so that you walk away from it and it's like, it's fine, I can walk away from this. It does nothing to me, you know, I put it at the back of,
So I think it's also very important to have clear boundaries of what is acceptable to you in those situations. Because if you know that you're going into a situation and they're going to be discussing things that you're uncomfortable about, okay, what are you going to do? So you have clear intent. They start that conversation, you excuse yourself and you walk out. Because that is just a consequence of them talking about things that you don't want to talk about, and I'm not going to participate. And it doesn't have to be done unkindly or nastily. It's just what I don't want to tolerate in my life. And that's also when you learn to grow a thicker skin, as in it doesn't matter what they think of me. It's matter what I think of myself and what God thinks of me. And that does come with maturity. I wish I'd learned this when I was very young.
Tracy, you said something that I just love. You said it doesn't matter what they think of me, it's what God thinks of me. I think one of the most comforting statements that you can know in your life and go back to your center and your core is to understand that it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. It's how you are in the eyes of your Lord, and that is unmatched.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Can I
freedom.
Can I add one piece to that? Because I was of the same thought, how can I say, process of, you know, not worrying what others think of you, you know, do what makes you happy, do what makes you healthy, etc., etc., etc. But we do live in the world, the same as people judge appearance. You live in the world amongst people, so I feel, just to add on a small piece there, is yes, not to care what others think, but also to be wary, or how can I say, to be aware of, how can I say, how other people, are perceiving, because that affects the relationships, that affects work, that affects every single thing in your life. Because fortunately or unfortunately, we forced as social beings to interact with each other. So if I didn't completely care about you at all, it would be a bit of a mess. But to just take that little extra and have awareness of what others are perceiving, or I guess what they think of your actions, I think that's important.
Yeah, Keegan, the way I'd like to describe this a healthy sense of self-worth is not just being confident, because confidence comes from doing something over and over again, and so you become confident in it. Having a healthy sense of self-worth is being able to go into a room completely unknowing of what might hit you, right? And coming out of that room when it's normal to feel hurt, angry, abused, feel whatever emotion you're feeling. And I'm not trying to turn all of us into robots. So feel those emotions, but then to have a strong sense of self-worth where you can go back to yourself and say, okay, A, B, C, this is fact, this is opinion, this is true, this is not true. Because like you said, we do live in a real world. And so that level of self-worth is something that we constantly strive for. Nobody reaches that and then they A-okay in life, because it is the real world. But that is the strong core that we're talking about, is to have that sense, is that it doesn't mean it's not going to irritate you, it doesn't mean it's not going to piss you off, but it's to have those feelings, but then have a strong center to go to.
Oh, 100%. That's why, that's the point I agree on. I just mean as in, if you're a leader or you want someone to be your friend, it's good to have awareness of what my things, but if that's in accordance with my code and I'm happy with it, then fine, then, move on and do whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
And remember, you never see somebody's intention, you see their behavior. So for us to look around and keep on worrying about their behavior is just it absolutely depletes us. So the only thing we can really do that we can control is be sure of our intentions. And that's the greatest gift you give yourself. So what is my intention? Because that's really all that matters, is your intention. Because people are going to have different behaviors, but behind that behavior is all intentions. So we're not even seeing that truth. So it's so much easier just to say, okay, so what my intention is, and I will follow my intention and hope for the best. And whatever happens, knowing that sense of self, like Samaya says, is that I have the coping mechanisms and the perspective to actually see it for what I believe it is, and to move forward so it doesn't hold me back.
There's a point that Keegan brought up, is especially when you're in a leadership role, because so far we've spoken about how people can affect us, right? And sometimes we've got to look at ourselves also, like how are we holding these unhealthy habits and unhealthy traits and affecting other people. And that's to, like Keegan said, to live authentically and have a good sense of self-integrity, that you can be self-aware enough to question, how am I making people feel? Okay, can I improve on this? Have I done this? And to live with that integrity. So that was the important point that he brought up, is also to look inward.
Yeah, 100%. And we can all do better, and we all can be better all the time. And in that progress is where our happiness lies. So we strive constantly for progress, because that will make us happier all the time. Anybody else? Oh. Well, thank you, Tash. That was very informative. And thank you for jumping in. I wasn't feeling well this morning, and I've had this virus. I've kind of been in and out of bed the last few days. And I asked Tash, okay, some practical hours coming up. And she stepped up, and she stepped up so well. And I really appreciate it. Thank you. It was an important topic tonight, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot from you all. So thank you.
Well done, Tash.
Yeah, well done, Tash. It was really good.
I certainly learned a lot by doing this. So it was a new topic for me. So it was very interesting to learn something new.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.